Hello, I'm Molly Holly and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. And many of you watching or have clicked on this video probably are already good leaders. Maybe you want to be a great leader. Maybe you just want to make sure that you're not doing anything that a bad manager would do. Because the thing is with pressure is what tests us as leaders. When the pressure starts to increase, when things start to get into a pinch, this is what really shows how much we can handle that pressure. And the good thing about pressure is you can practice, you can train. It is a skill. The ability to handle more pressure, fortunately, is a skill. Of course, some people are naturally better at handling pressure than others, but you can still develop it as a skill, because the thing is with pressure is the more pressure you can handle and remain calm, cool, calm, and connected, the easier leadership is, the better your leadership reputation becomes. And I honestly think that my ability to handle pressure is what led to many of my leadership opportunities. Like literally every company I worked at, I worked at 3, but at all 3 of them, like clockwork, I always got invited into leadership opportunities. The first company I worked at, there wasn't even a leadership opportunity. It was literally like my manager at the time pretty much said, the job you're doing is a role, but it needs to be a team. So how about you build that team, build the systems, lead the team? So that's the other thing. If you're not yet in a leadership opportunity, if you're not yet leading teams, the more leadership potential you have by your ability to handle pressure, oftentimes people will just be like, where's the leadership opportunity that we can create for this person? But for those that are already in leadership roles, whether you are working at someone else's company, so maybe you're in middle management, maybe even an executive, or you even run your own company. And if you run your own company, you're probably like me, where you love leading, but you hate managing. And so you want to make sure that you're not reacting like a bad manager. Maybe you had managers of your own that you definitely don't want to be like, or you notice yourself starting to behave like them. If that's the case, then you've definitely clicked on the right video, because in this video, I'll give you some examples of stress-based responses when the pressure increases, and the mistakes you can make or the mistakes you want to avoid when things get tough. And of course, what you can do instead, and how to practice being that great leader that can handle high pressure in a cool, calm, connected way. Because the thing is with pressure, right, it often happens, we feel it increasing when something unexpected happens, when something goes wrong, or when it's almost like the time available to us is decreasing and the problem itself is increasing. And so that our perception of how much we need to do within the time available is what starts to create that pressure. And it's quite interesting, because if you can almost reflect on past examples of when you were under pressure or when you felt the pressure, depending on at what point you really start to feel the pressure, at what point you want to react. So for example, if it's Monday morning and someone sends you one piece of work and it's got a mistake in it, and that piece of work is due at the end of the week, and you overreact to that, then that problem, which, let's be real, is it's a small problem, right? Compared to an overhaul of a whole project. So you got one mistake and the mistake needs to be fixed by the end of the week. And if you react intensely to that, then your ability to handle pressure needs a bit of work. You need to expand your ability to handle pressure, which comes with nervous system capacity. Getting comfortable with the discomfort of pressure is a side effect of increasing your nervous system capacity. So essentially, it's not that you are bad or good or whatever. It is just good to notice where you're at, reflecting on where you are. So if, for example, in reality or in comparison to other problems, the problem was actually quite small and the time frame was actually quite large, and that amount created a reaction from you, then, notice that's where you are. And there's, of course, more area to improve. The flip side of that, for example, is, say, Friday lunchtime and the project deadline is Monday morning, and a critical piece of the project, can't get done. There's a major obstacle. It puts everything at a standstill, and you essentially have a few hours to resolve it if you don't want to spend your whole weekend working, right? That's suddenly like really small time available and a really big problem. And when you can start to respond calmly with that level of pressure, or for example, if you've got your own company, and I know one of Grace Beverly's examples would be an insane amount of pressure, where she talks about when she first started Tala, and she was essentially selling, like the website was selling products that weren't actually in stock. That level of pressure is insane, because you literally have no time left. You have negative time available to fix the problem, and then you're having to fix the problem. So I think, honestly, there's many reasons why that girl is so successful, but her ability to handle pressure is just next level. Because the thing is, with pressure, with the increasing problem and decreasing time available, it's almost like there's this internal impending doom timer. And what we perceive will happen when that timer runs out is how bad we feel the pressure, the intensity of what needs to happen, and the reactivity or our ability to respond within that pressure. And the reason nervous system capacity building and nervous system regulation helps with that is it doesn't necessarily make the actual problem smaller, but it can make it feel more manageable. It doesn't necessarily give you back more time, but it makes it feel like you can do more in the time available. And your fear of the consequences when you do run out of time isn't as life-threatening, if you will. And so some of the mistakes you can make in leadership, which will position you as a bad manager or someone that people don't want to be led by, is reacting in any one of these 4 main ways, which coincide with particular stress responses. So, for example, something happens, it's going to be different for everyone in every industry and every team, right? But something happens and you feel the pressure, something unexpected, something breaks, someone comes to you with something, and the fight-based response would be to get quite visibly frustrated, to get upset, to get angry, to then be the one that is wanting to fix it and control and just fine, I'll do it anyway. Verbally or visibly upset in any way is the fight-based response. So that's a bit more of the, okay, well, I'm now going to push my way through this problem. I'm going to fight my way through this problem, and I'm angry at the people and frustrated with the people that created or contributed to this problem. Maybe, and even if you're not visibly or verbally upset directly with the person who either made the mistake or let you know about the mistake, or maybe no one actually made a mistake. Maybe someone just found out that things weren't going to fit together as well as you initially hoped. And even getting angry about the system, getting angry about, management or whatever's going on, just visibly frustrated and angry in a leadership position is going to put your team and the people around you on edge. The other one is the flight response. So that's when something happens and then it's you get a bit of panic. So now with fight, it's the frustration, the anger, whether it's at someone or at the system or at yourself or at anything. And then the flight is that panic, okay, well, quick, we need to do something about it. And it's you're running around frantic, I need to call this person. Why don't they answer? They need to answer. Okay, they're not answering. I'll just do it. And that kind of speeding up also makes the people around you quite anxious, because they're just oh my God, I can't. I can't think with that person running around just freaking out like that. And then you've got freeze, which is either doing nothing, or it can be even retreating, just like, I'm not dealing with this, I'm done. Walking out, just hiding away, becoming unavailable for anyone to call you or talk to you, just like, I'm not dealing with this, I'm done, I'm out, like, stuff this. Or just literally like, I don't know what to do. I can't do anything about it. I don't know what to do. Is also a phrase response, which is another response you don't want to have when you're in leadership. The other one is fawn. I would say fawn out of all four is probably the least problematic, but still not one you want to get into the habit of doing. And that would essentially be, say, to fix the problem, you need to ask for someone's help. And it's like, okay, cool. Well, like, can you really, I know it's a big ask, but I just really need you to help me with this. Like, it won't be too much and I totally will owe you if you just help me. And I just like, you know, if it's a no, then it's fine, but please don't say no, because I really, that's the fawning. It's the fear that you're now going to have to make someone uncomfortable by asking them to help you or asking them to do something. Or even if someone comes to you with a mistake and it's like, oh, it's okay, you know, I know you just like, you create mistakes a lot and like, we can work this out together. Don't do that, right? Don't do that either. That is not going to help either of you. It may feel like it's helping. It may feel like you're soothing, but you're not their mother or father. You're not the person's parents. You don't want to soothe them. And for the record, I'm pretty sure I have done all of these at some point, right? So, but now that you're aware of them and can reflect back on certain situations where you probably really needed to stay calm to be the one that provided that clarity and that stability, think back to examples and think about how you would have wanted to responded instead, or what you could have done differently or what you could have done better. Because at minimum, when the pressure's high, one, you're probably not the only person that's feeling the pressure, right? And two, in the leadership position, when you know, there's chaos, people will often look for you for direction to provide that calm clarity. So at minimum, when you're under pressure, you want to be calm and clear. Everything else that comes after that, like the specifics of how you actually go about relieving the pressure by solving the problem or managing or leading the situation, is really going to depend on your specific situation. But a good thing you can do is, one, reflect on the times you did respond in a way that you're proud of and reinforce that and remember what you did and how you did it and why you actually did it a bit differently. Because I know for me, in certain situations where I've really responded in a way to really high pressure, has been two things. One, I've had the authority to do something about the problem. And two, I have very much increased my nervous system capacity over time and decreased the fear of the consequences, I suppose. Because when you become aware of what you need to respond in the right way, when you are under pressure, sometimes you can actually just ask for it. For example, if you are in middle management and you realize that when you have the authority to make decisions, it makes it easier for you to think of solutions to problems. Hopefully you also have a good manager and you can literally ask, like, do I have the permission? Do I have the authority to make decisions for all of this? Like, an example for me is there was a particular, I can't go into full details, but with this project, essentially, I needed not only my team, but I needed other people's teams. I needed to lead other people's teams for a short period of time. And so I got permission to make sure that I could actually lead these people and no one would have any issues with us all working together. And having that permission to lead someone else's team was enough authority for me to be like, okay, this is how it's going to be coordinated. This is how we're going to solve the problem. And so really noticing on what you need as the leader. And the thing is, at your job, at your company, you're going to be somewhat familiar with the kinds of things that happen that create this type of pressure. So you can often preempt it, right? The other thing you can do is actually reflect on other leaders that you are really impressed with. If you haven't actually had any managers or leaders in your career that you've looked up to or you've seen as mentors or behave, even if them as a whole person, even if they aren't someone in entirely that you would look up to, did they handle things in a certain way that you're impressed with, that you yourself would like to model? What behaviors would you like to model? And if there's no one in real life, you can also look in movies, in books. It's really just a matter of remembering what behaviors are available to you, what behaviors are actually possible, different ways to respond in different situations, because there's not just one leadership style, right? There's not just one way to lead a team. And then when it comes to actually increasing your ability to handle more pressure, to increasing your nervous system capacity, there's two things. There's retraining your actual behaviors, and there's resolving the real triggers, like the trigger of the trigger. And so regardless of which of the ways you used to react, from this point forward, you now want to retrain yourself to respond. And the way that has worked really well for me, has worked really well for any of the leaders that I've mentored, is using what I call the 3 Ps. And the Ps are pause, perspective, and plan. So if you are very used to reacting in any one of those 4 ways I mentioned before, then the first thing you need to start doing, retraining yourself to do, is when something happens, when you start feeling that reactivity. For everyone, it's different. For me, it can be like heat increasing or a crushing sensation. So whatever it is for you, that is essentially your nervous system getting triggered. So that's the first, you'll have the first hint of reactivity before you actually start saying anything or doing something, or all of this is you'll actually feel it in your body. And so starting to become aware of what that feeling is. And then when you feel that feeling, to retrain, like, okay, when I feel this feeling, actually pause. Because the one thing a stress response doesn't want us to do is actually just pause. Freeze is the only one where you naturally pause anyway, but the pause is also pausing your thinking about it, pausing your whatever you're about to do, just stop, just pause, just take a moment. And initially retraining that, just retrain the pause. And then once you get familiar with the pause, you start doing the perspective shift. So the perspective shift is either the external perspective shift, so literally looking somewhere else. So if you've just gotten an email, a message, anything, for example, on the computer, even just looking out the window, looking away, so physically interrupting this, whatever is going on, by looking somewhere else. And then, of course, what's even better is actually getting up, moving, and walking outside, getting some fresh air, getting a warm drink, anything. Particularly if you're in freeze, you'll probably naturally pause. And if you're in freeze, you definitely want to do the perspective shift, because that'll just break you out of that freeze. That'll kind of defrost your nervous system and create movement or distance. It'll just like interrupt that interaction. And then there's the internal perspective shift, which is probably what you're taught in emotional intelligence. This is definitely an advanced way of thinking. It's, you can call it many different things, but it's essentially getting someone else's perspective on the issue. And if you do this already, then amazing. This is just confirmation that you're already doing the right thing. If you don't do this, I highly recommend it. And even in times when I've felt so frustrated, just like, oh, why did this happen? I pause and then I'm like, okay, before I say anything, let me ask, not in a passive aggressive, why did you do this way, but ask, hey, what actually happened? Or how did this happen? get the other person's perspective, get them to tell you more about it. It's not just like, hey, here's the problem. It's like, okay, how did you get to this point? How did you figure out we had a problem? What was missed? What did you misunderstand? And because using that curiosity, even if you have to semi-force yourself to be curious, is going to help diffuse any reactivity you're starting to feel. And it's actually going to be received really well by the other person. I had a manager who was really good at this. Like, he was really good. No matter what would happen, he would always ask, like, okay, well, how did it happen? What actually happened? As opposed to just assuming that me or whoever was telling him the problem was the reason for the problem and there was something wrong with them and all the stuff that can go through our minds. He was very good at asking, okay, what actually happened? And as my leader, he was someone I enjoyed following because that's how he responded to mistakes, to problems, to issues that came up. Whereas I've definitely had other managers who were just like, okay, I'll fix it, and then in a later conversation use it against me, which is definitely not what you want to do. And so getting the other person's perspective. What can also be really good is if you have a leadership mentor, whether it's within the company you work at or what's even better, outside. Because that same manager who was very good at asking the other person's perspective, he was someone I could also call whenever when I felt myself overreacting, but I didn't actually want to react. So I had paused in the situation I'm thinking of. I couldn't actually ask the person their perspective. And so I called up that manager at the time who I saw as a bit of a mentor. And I literally said to him, I go, okay, this is what happened. I'm feeling this way. I'm feeling super frustrated, but I do not want to react. Can you help me figure out what I need to do instead? And then he gave me his perspective on what needs to happen. And so with the perspective shift, it's the external perspective shift, so literally physically changing. And then there's the internal perspective shift, which is asking someone else. Again, if someone's brought a problem to you, it's asking them. If no one's brought a problem to you, because oftentimes, I don't know, something happens with a customer, something in the system breaks. Sometimes it's actually not anyone's fault, right? Even getting other people's perspectives, getting someone else's perspective on how they would potentially solve this or what they think the actual problem is, and just asking questions like that. Not questions about who should I blame for this, but questions about how can we solve this, which leads me to the next P, which is plan. Again, once you've paused, once you've shifted your perspective, then the next natural step is to be like, okay, well, how do we solve this? And either you as the leader can make that decision, because let's be real, like sometimes as the leader, you are the one that needs to have the plan. You're the one that is just like, okay, this is what we're doing. This is how we're going to fix it. There are times where you would want to ask your team or someone else, or you would want to allow other people to help you figure out that plan. But when the pressure's increasing, when the time's decreasing, sometimes you just need to be the one with the plan and execute that plan. And so either make the plan, this is what we're doing, coordinate the people you need to help you implement that plan, or similar to the perspective, ask around for, okay, how do you think we should solve this? Do you have any ideas about this? Depending on what it is and how much understanding you have of whatever it is that is creating the pressure. And so to respond as a good leader, as opposed to reacting as a bad manager, you retrain yourself to pause, perspective shift, and then plan. And when you do that, you will be seen as someone that can handle pressure. You will be seen as someone people will want to follow because you don't react under pressure. You plan, you solve problems, you bring clarity and calm to chaos, as opposed to the bad managers over there who are either yelling at people, running around, have disappeared, or are begging someone for more time or help or whatever. While you're over here, just pause, perspective, plan. So that's what you want to retrain. However, retraining won't fully get rid of the trigger necessarily. So even if every time things happen, something goes wrong and you feel that reactivity, and then you plan, perspective shift, no. And then you pause, perspective shift, plan. Great, perfect, you're responding like a great leader. But if you're still feeling that reactivity, then what you need to do is actually resolve the trigger behind the trigger. And so we often will just assume that our job triggered us, that person triggered us, the way they said something triggered us. But oftentimes the triggers we experience, there is a root cause or a trigger behind the trigger. So a really simple example, I'll use my dog for this. So she's part dingo, so no recall, or some recall when she wants to recall. So she is very independent and will make her own decisions, as part dingoes do. I, of course, know this, yet earlier on, there was a few times where she just fully ignored me and would do something entirely different. And I remember I just got so angry about it, like so frustrated. And I was like, this is such an overreaction for my dog not listening to me. Like, she's literally a dog. Like, it happens. It's a normal thing. It doesn't mean anything about me. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It doesn't mean she's a bad dog. So I was like, okay, why am I actually reacting about my dog running away? What about my dog running away actually triggers me? And for me, I realized it was like, okay, because she's not listening to me, someone ignoring me annoys me. And it's like, okay, why does that annoy me? Because I don't want to be disrespected. And so it's like, okay, that's interesting. So I have a deeper wound there around being disrespected. I really don't want to be disrespected. And so what can be really good about understanding the core wound or the root cause of that trigger is suddenly it's not actually about that person or about that thing or about you, or you can kind of create that distance between the trigger and what is actually triggering you internally to then heal that trigger, or what I like to say, resolve the trigger, requires much more in-depth guided process that I take my one-to-one clients through. If you're interested in that, you can either schedule a strategy call, or if you prefer the details in writing, also complete the application. And then I'm putting together more of, a program that either you can take yourself through, or a guided program, not entirely sure yet, called Cool, Calm, Connected. So if you're at all interested in that, either you don't want the one-to-one, not quite ready for it, but you are interested in this work, then definitely sign up to the Cool, Calm, Connected waitlist. And thanks so much for getting to this point. I hope this has helped. Let me know your thoughts on this, and I'll see you next time.